Designers love to complain about not having a seat at the table. But here's the thing. If you can't speak the same language as your engineers and your stakeholders, you'll never get invited in the first place. Story points might sound like developer math, but they're actually a bridge if you think about it. And today we're going to unpack why shifting from hours to Fibonacci-based story points changes the way designers can communicate, collaborate, and earn trust on their teams. So stick around because this one number game might just be the missing piece in your workflow. What's up, UX fam? How's your mom and them? Welcome to another episode of Beyond UX Design. I'm Jeremy. If you're new here, welcome. I am super stoked to have you. You ever ship a feature that should have never seen the light of day, survive a sprint planning where nothing got planned, or maybe you just said, let's circle back under your breath for the 50th time this week? Well, you, my friend, have earned a merit-ish badge. Introducing the Beyond UX Design Merit Badges, a vintage-inspired sticker series for UX designers, PMs, and engineers who have seen things. Choose from 3 sets: Soft Skills, Sharp Tongue, the Cult of Figma Initiation, and the Pixel Pusher Survival Kit. And more to come soon, so stay tuned. Each set of 5 badges celebrates the chaos, the coping, and the conference calls that should have been DM. Stick them on your laptop and flaunt them at your stand-up. Show the world that you made it out of Q2 with your sanity mostly intact. Get 1 set of 5 stickers for $12 or 2 sets for $20 at beyonduxdesign.com/badges. Just promise me one thing. Send pics and show me where you stick them. How often do you stare at a blank Figma canvas unsure where to start? This week's episode is brought to you by Mobbin, the ultimate UI and UX design inspiration library. Mobbin gives you instant access to over 400,000 beautifully designed UI and user flows from apps you love, and content is added weekly, so you never have to start from scratch again. Quickly find exactly what you need, search by app category, UI patterns, or even specific features. And my team and I use Mobbin daily at work to find useful patterns, and it helps my team work much more efficiently. And honestly, I can't imagine kicking off a new feature without Mobbin. So are you ready to level up your design process? Visit mobbin.com/beyondux to get 20% off Mobbin Pro and never run out of inspiration again. And if you haven't done it already, please consider subscribing to the show wherever you listen to podcasts. And if you are a regular here and you feel like you're getting something out of the show, I would really appreciate you leaving a 5-star review. That'll help me out so much more than you can imagine. And as always, thanks so much to Chris, Sarah, Kwan, Stacy, Radu, Megan, Andrew, John, Mark, Kevin, Jason, Michelle, Marty, Tino, Adina, and Zoe for all their support. And if you want to join these fine folks and many others and help keep the show independent and ad-free, you'll get exclusive access to the entire video library of episodes, including episodes before they're even released. Get instant access to the video archives right now for as little as $5 a month. And for more information on how you can support the show and help more people find out about what we're doing, make sure to check out beyonduxdesign.com/support. And of course, if you think the show is worth sharing, then for the love of God, tell your mom and them. So story points are not something that, as a designer, I don't think I've ever considered when estimating work. I've always done it in hours. But if you've ever been on an Agile team and you've worked with engineers closely, you will hear them talk about story points and all that stuff in sprint planning and stand-up and everything else. But what are they? Have you ever actually stopped to ask how you calculate a story point? If you're not familiar with them, they're always different. Every time an engineer gives a story point, one team, another team, it's always different, but that's kind of the point. And today we're going to talk to my good buddy, Naresh Shan, all about that. I am so excited to have Naresh on the show. Naresh Shan is a global director of UX and design ops with over 2 decades of experience transforming digital experiences at scale, currently running Aligned Consulting from Zurich, Switzerland. He specializes in building high-performance design teams and implementing design ops methodologies that deliver measurable business impact. And most recently at Johnson Controls, Naresh directed a 39-member global UX team, achieving remarkable results: 90% improvement in user satisfaction, 85% cost reduction through strategic alignment, and establishing design as a key contributor to the product backlog. He successfully embedded UX within product roadmaps, making design a strategic business partner. And prior to this, as head of UX and design ops EMEA at Swiss Re IPTQ, he built and led a 14-member team, promoting 4 designers into senior roles. His systematic approach delivered dramatic improvements: 50% reduction in user-reported bugs, 47% decrease in UI bugs, 70% drop in design issues, and 30% improvement in support ticket efficiency, all while establishing a scalable design system and comprehensive UX training programs. Earlier at Leon Tech Securities, Naresh pioneered the bank's UX strategy, cutting non-valuable backlog by 40%, reducing UI technical debt by 80%, and boosting conversations by 14%. If all of those numbers and metrics haven't impressed you enough, Naresh is going to join us today and tell us exactly how he did those things, hopefully using story points. And we're going to dig into that. So Naresh, welcome to Beyond UX Design, man. I am so excited to have you on the other side of the interview table. Last time it was me on where you're at. We would do a little flip-flop. So welcome to Beyond UX Design, man. I am so excited to have you on.
Man, thank you so much for having me on today. Yeah, it's a different flow this time. I'm on the other side and you're on the other side. So yeah, we're going to have a lot of fun today. And what an intro with all those statistics. Obviously, they're on my CV. And when you read them out to me, I'm like, wow, it's been a long journey. It's been a long journey.
Right on, dude. Before we get into it, tell us a little bit about you. And ultimately, how did you come to realize that story points were the way to go for the design team?
Let me take it. I think I'll take it back to when I was at Leon Tech Securities. I think at that time I was working with a really good Agile coach. And that Agile coach really taught me really the base ground fundamentals of what story points is and what the whole point of Agile was about. I find that Agile is not really suited towards developers because the whole thing about Agile was the thing about creating something fast, testing it, verifying it, and then, reevaluating. So I looked at the whole Agile methodology and I really saw that it fitted well with design. And then I tried to understand what is the actual point of story points. And then when I digged into it further, it really did have a one-to-one connection with design because it's based on effort and not time. And that's how I kind of moved into utilizing it within all the design teams that I kind of built. And before that, let me take 2 steps back before that. The reason why I moved into that Agile aspect is because I realized I'm not really a great designer. I know I'm not really a great graphic designer or UI designer. And, I think there's so many great UX designers out there. But what I found was I'm really, really good at analyzing where the design process fails in businesses. And that's when I brought in the whole Agile methodology to really help me in bringing design ops to companies.
I love that, dude. So the idea then that story points are the way to go. I'm really excited to get into this today because I frankly when you and I first talked about about this idea, the first thing I thought was damn, I'd never really considered story points to be something designers should be using. But in your argument about it being a bridge and a link to help us communicate better, because that is already how the rest of our team is communicating. I was like, damn, dude, we got to get you on the show to talk about this because this is, I think, something that would help so many teams as it relates to just getting in that cycle. We were always complaining about how we don't have enough time to do stuff. They come to us too late. If we can start to think in terms of points and use the same language that our teams are using, I think that's such an important thing. So let's talk a little bit about story points. One of the things that's really interesting that the teams I've been on, they all use story points differently, right? I've had some teams that are 60 points for large things. Some of them it's 8 points for large things. And then, these numbers are not meant to be literal, I guess, in terms of minutes or hours or days or whatever. And they're always usually relative, but I think that's the whole point as far as I understand it, from an Agile perspective. So tell us a little bit more about story points. How are they calculated? How do they work? And then let's get into how designers can use them.
So the Fibonacci scale goes up to a very, very high scale. And as you mentioned, people can use 60 points, they can use 30 points, but it's just choosing a scale that works perfectly for your design work or your design team. So you can choose anything as the highest number, and you can choose, there's only 2 choices of lowest numbers, really. There's 0, 0.5. They make it like an arbitrary number. So it's not a fixed number that, hey, what I do as 60 points is going to be the same as I do as another team as 60 points. So it's really based around what your team thinks is the arbitrary number to really say, okay, a 12 for me is a 13 for me would be a very, very high sprint of work. This is too big for us, and we have to break it down even further. So the numbers don't mean nothing. Really and truly, whatever your team uses as a number doesn't really reflect to another team. So that's one of the key things that you should always take into account. Now, once you build your team, as you've already then decided, okay, this is our arbitrary numbers that we're going to be using, your team needs to develop that understanding. Okay, well, what do you consider as a 13? What do you consider as an 8? And what did you consider as et cetera, et cetera? And that comes from learning what the level of work is going to be involved and really utilizing the numbers across the team. Yeah, so that's the second thing. And then the third thing is once you start to understand the use of the numbers. Now, let me give you a context. You mentioned that a lot of designers use hours. Yeah. They say, hey, I'm going to design something. It's going to take me 10 hours. But really and truly, can you be creative within 10 hours? If you think about all the work that needs to be done, you can't say to yourself that, hey, it's going to take me 10 hours to be creative. It can take up to 2 days. It could take up to 2 weeks. But if you start to say, hey, if I'm using hours as a way of explaining to my product managers that this is going to be delivered, then you're not really doing yourself justice. And you're not really doing the design methodology any justice, because you're rushing to fit into a certain gap. And so that's why the Agile number works. It's based on the level of effort, isn't it? And it said that, okay, well, look, if this amount of work is going to be a 13, so I need to book a meeting with the product manager. I need to go and have an alignment. I then need to do some sketches. I then need to get feedback. It's never enough impossible to say that it's going to take 10 hours. It could really take over like 3-4 days. And so that's why the Agile number really, really works within the UX field. I mean, what's your thoughts?
No, I like thinking about that because it goes back to, I think, something that I've experienced as a freelancer. I don't think it's directly related because I think the way you're doing this is a little bit different. But as a freelancer or a consultant, I have tried to steer away from giving estimates in terms of hours and instead giving estimates in terms of value to the person, right? So instead of saying, oh, you need a thing designed, that's going to be 100 hours, multiply that by my hourly rate, 125 an hour, whatever it is. So that's X dollars. You limit yourself and then that's also not scalable. And so it's hard to, I think, make a really successful freelance career, consulting career when you do charge by the hour versus, I think there's some time when you might, but that's the only time I've ever experienced, not trying to not estimate it by the hour. But what you're saying makes total sense to me. And that's one of the reasons why I've always understood too, that the engineering team will do this. They'll do it based on level of effort. And that point represents a level of effort. I'm curious, the Fibonacci sequence is something I've always kind of curious about. And you said you had an Agile coach. I'm wondering if they explained this to you. But the Fibonacci sequence, what does that have to do with this? Because maybe we could talk a little bit about what the Fibonacci sequence is, how it's calculated to previous numbers, whatever. But how does that relate to this? Why is that important? Is there something there that has to do with how we estimate? Or is it just a way to pick 3, 5, whatever? I'm curious.
That's a good question. I think the Fibonacci number was used because it's built on the golden ratio. And the golden ratio is it's like the base equation for everything, isn't it? Like anything you see, like plants or anything, built around the golden ratio. And I think the Agile people who put it together really use that sequence because then one is that there is a sequence to choose from and that doesn't differentiate from one team to another. So that everyone is using a set of numbers that are pretty much the same. And two, I think when you do calculate it up, it does give you a baseline figure across the team. Even though every team might be working in different velocity, it can still add up to some form of equation where resources are being used. And that's what I heard from an Agile coach. Even though a team might be doing 60 points here, they might be doing 10 points here, et cetera, et cetera. Once it comes up to the top table, they can still see their velocity based on the equations and using the Fibonacci sequence to then analyze the velocity and performance better across the teams. Does that make sense?
Yeah. I love that. So let me ask you this, because I feel like this is, math is something designers are generally not always very good at. Personally, I can speak from personal experience. That's why I dropped out of school and didn't become an an economist. I didn't like math. But so when it comes to figuring these things out and the math and stuff, I'm just curious. You've managed a lot of design teams. You've obviously improved a lot of things as evidenced by your bio and the numbers there. But I'm curious, what kind of struggles do you normally find when you're trying to get designers to think this way? What are the common complaints? And how do you tend to address them? I'm curious.
I think it's the same every single time. One is how do they come to a number? So how do they then say their work is a 5? And then how do they then say their work is 8? And then how do they accumulate those numbers? And I think that is always the common question. And how I break it down to them, and it's such a simple method. It's you look at a user story, and we're not going to go too much into user stories because user stories for me is completely different in UX. I'll touch upon it just a tiny bit. When you write user stories for UX, there should be just tasks. It should be just okay, we need to do X, Y, Z and not write a story as a designer, I need to make this in order to deliver this to the development team. And I've seen user stories written like that. But generally, your user story should give you enough detail in what is the level of work that's going to be needed for that user story to get to the end line. So for instance, if you have a user story and it tells you, hey, we need to create a wireframe for this mock-up for a hero banner on our landing page. And it will give you a brief description on the current issue and something of some acceptance criteria. So we need to make sure there's a wireframe that's been signed off, that it's been verified from development, that it's responsive, that we've done the mobile, tablet, and desktop. So you've got some basis of what you're going to be working towards. And so when I speak to designers, I ask them, so talk me through this ticket. What would you do from morning to evening? And they'll say, okay, what does that mean? And I say, well, break it down. Even if you say, oh, look, I have to have a coffee with the product manager, that's still a task. So then I start breaking that down. I say, break your user stories into simple tasks. Yeah. And so they started breaking down and say, okay, I need to do the mock-up. Then I need to book a meeting with the product manager. Then I need to get the review, make changes from the product manager. And I need to show it to development, get sign off. But then there's changes that development have made, which the product manager might not like. I need to then bring that wireframe back to development. I've got to book a meeting. Again, I then need to document these changes. And you can see there are loads of tasks in there. And so when I say that, okay, based on this and all the tasks you've done here, and another story that you've just done, and again, all the tasks, if you had to look at these two stories, and one's got like 12 tasks and another one's got 6 tasks, what would you rate them? If you had to choose a number between 0 and 12, or sorry, 0 and 13, what number would you choose, just randomly? And so they start to then say, okay, I would choose an 8. And then I asked them to explain to me, why did you choose an 8? And they go, oh, well, look, I have to book this meeting and it's hard to get hold of the product manager. So then they start to then develop that understanding. And then what happens is when your other team members start to come in, and again, they do the same thing. They write their story, they write their task, and then they all give their estimations together. They start to then see like different points of view. So when you do sprint planning and you bring all these designers, and at that point, they've understood one basic story, like why is this an 8 and etc. And then they start to do estimations together, and then you see the numbers. Then you start to hear the reasons why people think this is an 8 and why this person thinks it's a 5. And you start to then build that understanding of level of effort towards each other. And again, the basis of story points is just to give an arbitrary number on your velocity. So for instance, you're doing a sprint and normal sprints are about 2 weeks. Yeah. And you see like over 2 or 3 sprints. Okay, normally it's about 3 sprints you start to make the average. After the 4th sprint, you start to see the level of stories that you finish start to accumulate. You start to say, oh, this sprint I've done 20 points. This sprint I've done 24. This sprint I've done 22. Your manager starts to analyze that, hey, this team member, I can always get 24 points out of them. Yeah, so no matter what, it's an average, and it makes it as an average. So your manager starts to analyze that. If I have a bunch of stories and, you know, they've all been estimated, I know that I can get 24 points regardless, every single sprint out of that person. It allows me, or as a manager, to plan accordingly and then execute accordingly with developers and product managers.
Yeah, I love that. So the idea too, and I think this is something maybe we could talk about. I work with an engineering team now that they have a budget of points. And when they do planning, they'll say, well, we've estimated these things to take this many points. We've got a budget of, let's just say 160 points for the sprint. We've got, 200 points estimated. We got to cut something. What can we do within the points? So how does that tend to work? The budgeting. How does a team know what their total sprint budget should be as far as points go? So we've got, the estimation makes a lot of sense. How does a team figure out what they can actually do within a given sprint time period, whatever, let's just say sprint? How do you guys do that?
When I mentioned, once you've gone past that 3rd sprint and that 4th sprint, you start to know average numbers, of each of your team members. Once you've gone to that maturity where you as a manager know that out of this team and each person, say for each, you got 5 people, every single sprint, they deliver 20 points without fail. And let me backtrack it as well. As a good as a good UX manager or a good design manager, you should be able to plan tickets in for your team members where there's a high level of priors and low level of priors. So what does that mean? I'll give you an example. When I normally manage teams, I know this person does 24 points and I know that I've got a high prior feature that needs to be delivered. So I would fill up their sprint with as much high prior as I possibly can. If I go over that 24, I know I'm going to fail in the delivery. She's going to fail, he is going to fail, and they're not going to make it. So I give them enough so they can complete, and I give them low prior tickets, something that could be probably worked in 2 sprints. So I could fill up their backlog to about 30 points if I wanted to. But I know that every single sprint, 20 points without fail is always going to be done. And that's one team member. And then I look at my 5 team members, I know that it's 100 points every single sprint. So I'm able to speak to product managers and VPs and say, look, my team every week will deliver 100 points. And I know then what the cost of the month will be. So I know that the team can deliver, 2 sprints will be like 200 points, et cetera, et cetera. And that is your cost to what you can work with. So you know that if this product or this feature is planned for, this usual, what you just mentioned, you've only got 200 points, or let's say 600 points to mess around with. You know that basically I can only work in about 3 months of work, and basically 200 points would accumulate up to 600, which is basically 3 months of work. So the arbitrary numbers really help you in the project management and the planning to know that your team's velocity is always going to deliver that.
So when I've been involved with, and I'm not a manager, by the way, I'm not a UX manager. So, I appreciate you helping me figure these things out. But when I've been involved with planning, let's just say like quarter planning or roadmap planning or whatever you want to call it, whatever length of time you do, what I've found is that the engineers will say, over this amount of time, we can do X and here's the points and here's our capability, our capacity and all that stuff. And they're using these numbers. When the engineering team is doing that, it makes sense. When the designers come in and they start throwing around like, it'll take us like a week or 2, it gets to be really confusing. And you start to hear, I think, some of that mismatch in communication. But and I want to talk about that in a second, but before I do that, the thing that I'm curious about, and this is something that I've worked with on software teams with many different pods, teams, whatever you want to call them. And each of them had a different measurement for what a point was worth, right? When it comes to planning and everybody coming together, because I think the value there is that communication and shared communication, shared understanding of what a point actually means, should designers come in with trying to use the same points that the engineering teams they work with use, like the same scale? Or do you recommend them coming up with their own points the same way that the engineering teams tend to do it? Like, how do you generally advise teams do that?
Might have some backlash with this one.
Not for me, because I don't know what the hell I'm talking about. You're going to hear nothing from me.
I believe in the decentralized methodology. There's always the opinion that you should have the centralized team or have a decentralized team. I personally believe in the decentralized team. Now, what does that mean is that basically when you have a decentralized team, is as you mentioned, the developers have one set of story points and the designers have one set of story points. Now, if you try to amalgamate them both, what happens is, yes, you do use the same scale, the same numbers. But what tends to happen, from my experience, is that the sprint planning and ceremonies and et cetera that happens with development does not really coincide with designers. So what I've noticed is that the sprint stand-ups, the retrospectives, the sprint preview or the presentations, et cetera, tends to be more developed, focused rather than design. So I've done that. I tried it. I did try it. It's not like I'm saying it without experimenting with it. I tried to make a centralized team of developers and designers. Designers felt detached. They found that most of the stand-ups, they weren't even heard. They were like the last one to speak. Most of the time during the stand-ups, developers were speaking a language which the designers didn't even understand, and vice versa. It caused more problems than improvements. And so when I decentralized them and I had a design lead speak on behalf of the designers that went into development stand-up, the communication was much, much better. It was much more centralized. It was much more efficient. And again, the lead would get information that would then feed back into designers. So my answer to that question is I would approach a decentralized team. But again, it's just what I've noticed. I think you can also achieve it with a centralized team. But one of the key things, I see the benefits. I can't say that it's not a benefit. When you have a centralized team, meaning developers and designers, developers start to understand the level of work that UX do. So, many of us, and probably a lot of people that listen to this podcast have heard the people say, go and put your UX touch on it. They've done the design, development have done design. They say, go and put your UX, paint on it. And it's like, dude, do you even know what you're asking for? And, the level of effort in doing UX design and doing UI design, it's not like we just make stuff look pretty. It's like, hey, we have to do our research. We have to do methodologies, et cetera, et cetera. So when you have that centralized team, the developers start to know, oh, wow, this is what they actually do. They're not just making buttons look pretty. They have to look into their design system. They're looking into the design patterns. And that level of education does grow. And I have seen that grow with a centralized team. But then I weigh out the pros and cons. What's the benefit of a developer knowing what a designer does? And is it better designers performing and delivering? I put the lesser of two evils. In my experience, I would decentralize them. And again, keep the numbers separate, because your design team, who are a bunch of researchers, leads, content writers, if you're lucky, behavioral science, you name it. And I'm naming these as what I had in the team in IPTQ. So each team member would really able to understand the level of effort that's needed for their user stories. And that built that community within that team.
I love that. Yeah, I tend to agree too with as far as the decentralized approach. The way that I've tried to organize my teams, and it's sort of off topic a little bit, but I'll tie it back at the end to planning and stuff. We had multiple pods, and my team today is very similar. We've got multiple engineering teams that we work with. And the way I like to structure it is, the one of my UX designers is sort of attached to a development team in a way. And so maybe this is, I don't know if this is decentralized or not now that I'm thinking about it, but they're sort of attached. The planning that we do is separate because we always try to work several sprints ahead, or ideally like a quarter or more ahead, and have that stuff ready for the engineers to sort of just pick up and build it. But they'll be attached to it when the team goes to build the stuff, So like, for instance, they'll go to stand up and they'll, keep their ear to the ground, essentially, like, hey, I heard you say this, that's not what we planned. Or, hey, that thing looks weird, that's the wrong color or whatever. The border radius is wrong, whatever it is, those kind of like tactical things, and make sure that they get the thing built. But when it comes to planning, decentralized, I like that a lot, and having, us work ahead. Because what I found is when the team is attached to a development pod, they have to then work in sprints. And it's so hard to fit design work in 2-week chunks. I mean, like we sort of like we talked about before, which I think is why, a lot of times we get the pushback on trying to get your time and estimated in in story points. I think there's value in that. It's like the 2-week sprint. I think that's really hard. So like, I guess like when you're talking about centralized, you get it, you sort of tie that work to the 2-week sprint. Is that what you're thinking? Yeah. Like in a centralized team? Yeah. Okay. Yeah. That's always been challenging.
Even in a decentralized team, I still get them to work 2-week sprints. Yeah. Yeah. So I always work in sprints no matter what. And the reason being, it just gives us a better way to plan, because when you start a sprint, you have to then start planning for the next one. And again, you need to start getting the tickets, you need to start getting the requirements. And it's as you mentioned, you just mentioned something which was one of the reasons why I decentralize designers. When designers are always paired up with developers, it's like you have to design something today and we need to develop it tomorrow. And it's always the case that design needs to be at least 2 sprints ahead. And that's 4 weeks, And I'm saying that's the minimum. So it gives us as designers enough time to go to product management, go to development, see the technical feasibility of this design, get feedback from developers to retract the design a bit, go back to product to say, are you happy with retracting and this? And, I always tell designers, try to move as fast as you can with products. And I think designers are best paired up with product managers. They're best situated with them because they know the requirements and the features that are coming in, and they can get the head start and start to at least drip and drab designs that have been signed and handed over and matches a definition of done and says, hey, we're good to go.
Yeah, no, that's cool. It's really interesting just to hear how other teams work. And to be honest, like the teams that I've worked with, we tend to work in sprints as well. But I'll be honest, man, a lot of the times that it just gets so sloppy, like we don't really do like our own design sprint planning, and it's just sort of like trying to get stuff ahead of time so we're done by a certain time. But it's funny, like I was just thinking the other day about Parkinson's law, the idea like you give someone any amount of time, it will take up that time. So it's like, if you don't, the reason why I like the 2-week sprint idea is like it helps you time box and says like, do what you can in 2 weeks, like try. If you don't get it done in 2 weeks, that's okay. Like generally speaking, it can always go over to the next sprint. It's not like you're going to get fired if you don't finish in 2 weeks. But if you give yourself 4 weeks, it's going to take 4 weeks. Like it's just no doubt about it. You're going to procrastinate. You're going to do other stuff. So anyway, the idea is good. I just like in practice, like my teams at least, we've always tend to just be kind of sloppy with it.
But that's it. That's the whole point of it. That's actually the whole point of it, and that's why I brought it into design teams, because every designer is not always going to do 20 points. And, one thing I always tell people who come into teams that I look over is just because somebody does 20 points, it doesn't mean they do more work than you just because you do 8. You could do 8 points of great work, and he does 20 points of like mediocre work. It's not a competition inside. The more story points, the more I deliver. And as a UX manager, or when you go into a managerial role, your job as a manager is to get the best out of the team that you look after, and you got to analyze where their strengths are. So you just mentioned, hey, this wireframe could take this designer 4 weeks, or it bleeds over. We call it a bleed over. It bleeds over into the next sprint. So then you're, as a manager, you need to then analyze, well, why did that ticket bleed over? Did we not estimate it correctly? Was it too big? And could we have cut it in half and say, this half he does, or he or she does this, and then next week, he or she does this? Because I know from experience, when I've given a wireframe ticket to that person, it took them 4 weeks. So it gets you better, and also understanding your team's strengths and weaknesses. Because some designers might be, hey, look, I'm really bad at UI design. I'm terrible. It might take me a month to do it, but at least my manager will know that, hey, look, it will take me a month. And then that person can really work and say, okay, cool. If it's going to take you a month, I'll plan enough time for you to complete it over the period that we have. So it also really helps in that aspect.
Yeah, I love that, dude. It's interesting. Like I just like go back to this idea, like, as designers, we always say it depends. And the way that every team works is like completely different. And I love hearing the perspective of like another team that seems to have it together and has like a very structured approach to how this works. And it's different than the teams that I've worked on in the past. Some of them have been more structured, tried to be more structured, but it always falls apart. And I'm curious, like, this is the next thing I want to kind of talk about is starting off, it probably works really well. How do you get the teams to just keep going? Is it just sort of like, as a manager, you need to just stay on them and not let them slack off? Or like, how do you get a team to stay committed to this over time? Because like I said, in my experience, it sort of gets sloppy. The longer it goes on, the sort of sloppier it gets. So how do you do that? How do you fix that?
I think the first thing is understanding. So the first thing is really understanding level of effort. So really, when I take this story, the level of effort, this is my points. And when you do sprint planning together, what tends to happen, and it really does happen every single time, your team members start to really have the same numbers. So when you do sprint planning, everybody, I do it with voting cards. So Jira normally has these kind of cards, and then you choose your number. And then once everyone's chosen, they reveal their numbers, and then everyone has to explain if the numbers are not the same. And then, what tends to happen is that the teams, I would say after the third sprint, it's always after the third sprint for me, the teams start to build some cohesion together and say, okay, cool, I understand that's a 5 points. And they really start to work together and say, hey, look, I can build you templates so that you don't have to do that again. So we can reduce the story points even more. So you start to see that collaboration that comes together. The second one that really helps in keeping the momentum is a retrospective. The retrospective really allows, I would say that's when you start to break down the communication barriers, because people start to put their points across. So yeah, the second point I want to mention is that keeps the team in line is retrospectives. Now, I'll give this advice to anyone who does retrospectives. When you get people to put their points, allow them to make them anonymously. So their name is not there in the beginning, just in the beginning. And so they start to see that basically people are making comments and people are speaking freely. And then what happens is when you start to do a retro, the team make the judgment on what needs to be improved. So as a manager, your job is to sit back and just let them solve what things are being the issues. You're noticing that the team members, 10 team members have made this comment. They bring those issues into a vote. They all vote which one needs to be fixed. And then you as a manager need to make sure in those 2 weeks you can try and fix them. But it gives the power back to the team members that, hey, we make the decisions. We're actually making a difference. We're making an improvement. And so that starts to build momentum, and that starts to really start to pick up. And as I mentioned, when your team members give you stuff to fix, you as a manager need to fix them. That doesn't mean that you keep pushing them to the next backlog, to the next backlog. Your job as a manager is to fix those issues. So if there's communication issues, you need to go and solve them. If they're getting slack from developers, you need to go and jump in the front and speak to that developer. Your job as a manager is to go and take those hits and take those punches and not let the team members' motivation go down. And then the third one, which brings a lot of great experience and team unity. I don't know if you know this, we say in Europe, it's called a round robin.
Round robin, yeah.
Yeah, round robin.
Is that a British thing or an English thing? I don't
know. I just heard it from an Agile coach. And
okay.
The round robin Agile thing is that you get your team members to sit around a room or, be on a call. And each one needs to thank a team member for what they did in that sprint for them. Whether it was like, hey, you helped me with this and to understand this, and I want to thank you. And, John, you helped me come with that situation with that developer if I wasn't free. And I'm not lying to you. Every single time you do that with team members, the unity within that team is amazing. It starts to, because you've just had your retrospective where you're complaining, and then you've then come with your round of robin where you're then giving thanks. And everybody loves thanks. Everybody loves kind of comments like that. So yeah, those are my 3 things that kind of help me in pushing teams forward to keep the momentum.
Yeah, I love that. Yeah, like you said, I think it's sort of one of those things, like just humans in general, we always want to revert back to the way that we have worked in the past, whether it's good or bad. And I think it's just like important for the leadership to stay on it. The other thing, because the audience, most of the audience here are not necessarily managers. A lot of them are individual contributors. I think it's one of those things where I would say just don't complain about it. Just disagree, but commit. We've talked about followership a lot in this podcast, and just disagree, commit, say your piece. If the team decides to do that thing, then just go with it and just try and just do your best, and don't try to undermine it. I think that's like the biggest thing, because I've actually seen that happen for just lots of things, not just story points and stuff in general, but just like lots of things. So the last thing I want to talk about, we're going to talk about actionable takeaways, things to start trying. But before we do that, one of the things that I want to talk about is just the benefits that you've seen. So we talked a little bit about communication, improved communication, and speaking a shared language. But tell me a little bit about, like, there was just some of the benefits that you've seen. How have you seen this help that communication barrier perhaps break down between developers, engineers, stakeholders, PMs, things like that, when designers start to embrace the story point model?
I'm going to choose top 5 then, because there's loads. There's actually so much that come at top 5. I think one of the key things, and one of the biggest ones, is product management and anyone outside of your design team start to really understand a bit more about what UX does and the level of stuff that we have to do. So that's the number one benefit when you move over to story points and you start to speak a bit of the the business language, people outside of it really do see that, oh, wow, moving a button is not so simple. Changing this color from blue to red is not as simple, especially if you have a design system in place that's already done their accessibility checks, et cetera, they really start to understand that, okay, the designers do a lot. Second thing I would say is once you do start to really, and again, it's about your team members being able to communicate and being able to, speak on the behalf of the team. What happens is you tend to not just take tickets in from anyone. So randomly, and this happens a lot in companies, people will go behind certain people's back and say, hey, can you quickly do this design for me? It's only take 10 minutes, but so they will try and throw a ticket into a sprint without manager knowing. And, it happens. It really, really happens. And so what happens is you build a team that's built on some strictness, that they can't take in random tickets from people that, that doesn't have any contribution to a backlog. Now, sometimes if you're a good agile manager, if you're a good UX manager, and as I mentioned, you would have a level of high prio and a level of low prio, you can mix and match. You can say, oh, okay, look, I'm going to estimate at least there's some buffer, and those are your low prio tickets. But, generally what tends to happen is people just can't come to you and say, can you quickly do do this for me. So they don't make you veer off the track. Third, developers love, I would say, when you start to get into this method of sprint planning, developers like to come in to some of your stand-ups or some of your plannings. And they even like to come in some of your ideation so they can really get involved with you. And you mentioned about a designer pairing with a developer. What we tend to do when we do kind of like discovery sessions, and discovery sessions when teams come together and they start to do ideation, we try to bring development in because they bring the most best ideas. They bring the best ideas, in my opinion. So you start to see that because they're like, wow, the developers are saying, well, this team is starting to mature. They're maturing in their ways of working and we can contribute and et cetera, et cetera. The fourth thing I would say is your team, that your team can really perform week in, week out. You as a manager tend to get a bit lazy. I got a bit lazy myself because I knew that every single time without fail, this team could deliver X, Y, Z. So I knew that they can mess around with about 400 points. And it was really the point where they were telling me what to do. And you want that as a manager. You want that where your team members are giving you guidance, saying, hey, look, Naz, we need to fix X, Y, Z. It's going to be that much story points. Can we fit it in? And I'll be like, yes, you can, because you've got capacity. And the last thing, as I just mentioned, it's the team cohesion. I think when you start to bring in the guidance of these agile methodologies, your team really work together. They really can bounce ideas from you. They start to understand your capabilities. They understand your skills, and your team members don't feel threatened by it. They're very honest that I'm not a good UI designer. I skip UX. I jump straight to Figma, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. They start to analyze as a team together, say, hey, no, try to do it this way. And and that's what I've noticed. I have not seen to this day where when I've brought in this methodology, it's fallen apart.
Yeah, I love that, dude. All right, so you've sold me. I am sold on the idea of story points. I think this is such a great way to just, I would even say just try it. Try it for a little while and see how it works out. But let's say somebody is excited. They listen to this episode today and they're like, damn, Naresh, making a lot of good points here. What are some ways that they can get started in this? How do you recommend a team kicking this off and getting ready to do this thing?
Hard question. There's so much to tackle from. If you want to start this and you've never done this before, are we talking from a management perspective or are we talking from...
Yeah, I guess, here's the thing. All right, so that's a great question. It's a really good question. So most of the people listening are probably not necessarily leaders by title, but maybe they have some influence over their manager. Maybe they could tell their manager to come listen to this episode.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Okay.
And want to start. Yeah. So let's, I don't know. What do you think is the best way? Like, how would an individual contributor maybe start thinking this way? But then also, like, how would a team from a management perspective start doing this as well?
So if I was in that situation, whenever I go to a company, and especially, look, design ops is change management. It's just another word for change management. The first thing I do is analyze what is going wrong and what's going right. So you could do a retrospective, you could do a SWOT analysis. I like to do it with Lego. I don't know why, because it brings the best out of people. And you could do it online because, we're at the age where, I'm at the age where a lot of people have kids. And if you don't have kids, you could go to a shop and buy some Lego. And Lego Serious Play is a really good one. It's a really good one because you're just using your imagination and you start to get them to build models on what is going right and what is going wrong in this team. So then they build a representation on what they think is that. And you will see a pattern on all the models that your team would build. From there, you can then see where things need to be improved. And communication needs to be improved with product managers. We're not brought in on time with development. We're brought in late. We're told to do this. We're pixel pushers, X, Y, Z. And then the next thing about that is then when you start to understand their weaknesses, bring everyone together and then say, if we want to adopt this, we need to start coming together and start building our mission, vision, and purpose statement. Build that. Say, what do you want to represent? What is our mission? Do you want to increase our maturity, which should be the goal of every UX manager, but your team should have a mission, vision, purpose. And you'll see, and I'll guarantee you, 9 out of 10 times, I bet you will be, we want to be counted as a partner within the company instead of being used as a tool. And I'll tell you, 99.9% of the mission, vision, purpose statements I've seen teams is that they're not respected. They're told to push pixels. They're not brought into planning, etc. It's always the same. And then once you've got that mission, vision, purpose statement, you now have got the reason to then move over, or you've got some leverage to move into proper sprint planning. You say, hey, look, if we want to be accepted in this company, if we want our VPs to look at us as strategic partners, we have to change our ways of working. We have to change our method of working. And then that's when you start to bring in. Again, this doesn't happen overnight. Take your time with it. I guess anyone who's in design ops or come from a design ops or works in change management knows that you can't change things overnight. It has to be done gradually. And as you start to do that, and my last sentence, because we can go on a bit for long about this, is don't do stuff where you're the sole person. You can lead them, yeah, but bring people along the journey, yeah? Don't just say, hey, I've got this new idea. Let's do sprint planning. Let's do this. It's like, no, you're just basically going to hit a dead wall. Bring people along with you. Because if you don't, I will guarantee you will not be able to implement any change into that company because you've now lost trust. 1, 2, you tried to look like the hero and, failed. And 3, it's not a solo game. It's a team game. And you have to bring the team along with you.
Yeah, and it's like it goes back to the idea that relationships will help enable your team to make better software. I don't know where it's crazy how it all comes back down to that. No, I love that, man. And also too, if you're listening and you're not a manager and you don't have direct control, I think you do have a lot more influence than you probably think. And, just going and talking to your manager and saying, listen, I'm seeing these issues. This is what's happening today. Could we try this? Maybe an experiment, like try it for a sprint or two. Although I guess if you were advising someone, how long would you say to give it a trial to try it out? Because you mentioned before, in order to start getting those averages, you need to have at least 3 or 4 sprints. So is there a trial period you'd recommend for somebody who wants to try this out? Is a trial the right way to approach it? Would you be able to do this with just a few designers, or should the entire team do it? Or how would you advise that?
If you're new to it and everything, and again, it depends on the size of the team, try it with a small group. Definitely try with a small group if you can. No more than about 3, just to get you kicked off. And for me, the average worked after 3. But if you're new to it, I would say give it at least about 5 or 6 to then see if it's working, if it's beneficial. Take into account if you are a lead, and I'm looking at a design lead from here. If you do decide to go down this route, take into account you won't have time to do design work because this is a management role. So it's people like you mentioned who are listening in this are still in that design aspect. Because I moved into management at a very young age. It is the fact that you will start moving away from messing around with Figma and doing the creative stuff. You will get involved. Your level of messing around and experimenting will drop dramatically. So you need to make that decision yourself. Are you willing to move away from the creative aspect? Because I have seen a lot of leads try to do both and you can't. It's like you have to sacrifice one for the other. So yeah, give it about 6 weeks.
Yeah, dude, I just from personal experience, I have experienced that completely because my current role, we don't need to get too deep into it, but my current role, I've recently been put on a lot more design work. And as the design lead for my team, I am now getting asked questions and I'm I don't know because I actually haven't been doing the design lead work. I have no idea where that thing is. I don't know why we made that decision. I wasn't involved. I had to skip this meeting because I had to have this deliverable for, the design done. And so I've been trying to do both and it's made it really hard to do either, to be perfectly honest. I feel like a failure. I'm failing in both because I just like you said, it is very hard to do both. And it sucks sometimes you don't get to get in there in Figma and move the pixels around and make pretty things, but that's your job. I mean, as design lead, I would argue you're not really doing the hands-on work. You can certainly lead by having conversations, design critiques, offering advice, things like that, but you're not the one pushing the pixels around. And if you try to do both, it's funny, because we've talked about this too in the past, the idea of service design. And I hear a lot of people talk about how UX designers could just do service design. Why can't UX designers do service design? I'm how could you do both? How could someone who's doing service design be really good at that and then also be effective as a UX designer in the same role.
Exactly.
Like, yes, maybe a designer can do both, but they're not able to do both. How can they actually do both? So I see there's a lot of overlap there.
Yeah, we could go on for ages because I'm one of them people who believe in the specialists rather than the generalists. So, I hear now that, and I've had some people on the podcast talk about this, we're moving back into that generalist aspect where designers are also doing research and they're also doing content writing and they're also doing, and it's like, hey, no, that doesn't make sense.
And I would say in that case, those examples are generally not because it's better for anybody. It's just because I only had to pay one person. And so That's a budget. That's a resource allocation, trying to skimp on that, But.
As you just mentioned, and I think a lot of designers, again, people listening to podcasts, when you start to move into leads and management roles, you tend to, again, you move away from Figma and you start to look more at spreadsheets and influence. And, how they call it, Thomas Wilson said it, it's called political collateral. That's what happens when you start moving into these type of roles, director roles. And it's not for everyone. Again, you do have to lead. And if you do have a good structure in place where your design teams are delivering, you then have the political collateral to start moving in director type of roles. And so we could definitely have a podcast about this, me and you. So
absolutely, man. Yeah, it's funny you mentioned spreadsheets. I just, before our call today, I got a whole spreadsheet I have to go fill out for my team and like percentage done and all this crap because we're not tracking story points. Which is like the irony of all this. It's like literally what one of the guys said was like, hey, I know this is like, the way we track, and we use linear, but the way we're tracking in linear, it's not set up right and blah, blah, blah. So we can't pull this stuff. Can you fill this out for me? And I was just thinking right before this call, I'm like, damn, if we had just like had story points and all that, you just go in there and you could see it and you could track it and it would be, I'd save me from filling out a spreadsheet. But here we are. Yeah. So, all right, Naresh, man, this has been fantastic. I've had a blast talking to you. As you probably know, as a friend of the show, at the end of these episodes, I like to ask all of my guests a few questions to help our listeners get to know our guests a little bit better. But before we do that, why don't you give yourself a plug? Let everybody know where they can find you and what you're doing. And also, it wasn't in your bio, but your podcast, one of my favorite podcasts, Design Ops Online podcast. Give yourself a shout out, man. Let everybody know where they can find you.
You can find our podcast. It's actually been changed over. So when Jeremy came over to our show, it was called Design Ops Align. And just recently, beginning of this year, I started my own company called Align Consulting Group. And we bought over Design Ops Align podcasts as well. And it's now called the Aligned podcast, but it's on YouTube and you can find it there on Spotify, Apple. So we're on all those networks again. I think this season, we just wrapped up season 2. Season 1 was crazy for us. Jeremy was on season 1. We done 40 shows. And then in season 2, we done 30 and we're just backlogged at the moment because, not only did I start the company, I bought the company, Design Ops Align, off my business partner. So I brought the whole team over to there. So we've just been transitioning the last 3 months. So you can find us on YouTube. You can also find us on our website, alignpodcast.com. And you can find myself on LinkedIn. Again, what else can I say? You can find our website, align.consulting. Our company mainly focuses now on AI governance, accessibility, and GDPR and privacy. So it's one of the key things we thought, the business partners who bought Design Ops Align, they looked at the strengths of what Design Ops Align brought, which was the operations within research and design. And so they bought that arm and they took me over with it. And so we've amalgamated our consultancy into one big group now. So
right on. That's awesome, man. Yeah, it's inspiring as someone who had their own consultant for a while, trying to do their own thing. I love what you guys are doing. And at some point, I need to figure out how you actually do it and make some money. That's an important thing to also think about.
I need to also get rid of that. So probably this is the last time people are seeing that. And Jeremy, you're up there somewhere.
Yeah, I got one of my little stickies up there. Hell yeah, dude. Yeah, I love it, man. So. Yeah, that's cool. That's a great idea, by the way. I love that. I like having the little memento from all the episodes behind you. Just something to remind you, all the words of wisdom. So, Naresh, before we get out of here, man, you have got something cooking up in a few weeks. The Value UX conference, you and our mutual friend, Dale, husband, who is not on the show yet, but he's working on it. I've actually been on his podcast too, which is really funny.
Yeah.
Really, very incestuous group here. But anyway, Value UX, man, tell us about it a little bit. Give Value UX a plug and let everybody know how they can get in there and all that stuff, man.
Brilliant. Yeah. So Jeremy, you're one of the speakers that's come in. One of the key things with Value UX, I think why me and Dale started it, was the prices of conferences are just skyrocketing like crazy. And like, we found out a lot of people coming to us, or people were messaging Dale and also messaging myself like, hey, what conference can I go to where I don't have to spend so much money? So, I mean, with Value UX, it's accessible for everyone. It's online. You don't have to pay anything to enter. You just have to sign up. I must apologize to anyone listening to this podcast at the time of this release. We did not know we were going to have such a mad hit of people that signed up. So just to give everyone some context, the platform that we're using told us that 500 people is good performance. After that, it starts to drop.
You guys have that many? Damn.
We hit 380 within the first month and a bit.
No way.
And we were 6 months. Yeah, we were 6 months away from the conference. So after like the second month, we had to slow down marketing. We had to slow down because I think that's the selling point. The people wanted to come to a conference where it's free. Obviously, it's in a virtual space, so it's not a webinar. It's not you click on a link and you're just seeing the talks. You're walking around as your avatar in this space. There's going to be loads of games, loads of ways to network. We do ask you to try and put on your camera because it would be nice. Because when you walk up to somebody with your little avatar, with your little 16-pixel avatar, it's like you're actually there speaking to them. And so that's the whole point of it. And we want to make sure that this message, like people who do come to the conference, any donation. So we are putting out donation links, but none of those donation links are to Value X. So we have put that in all our contracts with everyone. Any donations that are made to a speaker goes directly to a speaker. And that's our ethos of our conference. So when you come to a conference and you've seen a talk and you liked it, there is a donation link for every single speaker. And if you donate $5, that speaker gets that $5. Value UX does not take a single penny. And that's going to be our ethos all the way through. And that's it. That's our business model. Our business model is that we should not make money from speakers. We should not make money from the attendees. And really and truly, it should be an accessible event and knowledge should be free. But, do reward the people who do speak at this event because they have to create the talk and go for a lot of effort.
Yeah, I love that. So what's the date and time and all that stuff? And are you trying to not promote it as much because it's
no. So it's a 3-day event. 30th of September to the 2nd of October. It starts at 1 p.m. Central Eastern Time, so 1 p.m. Swiss time. And we've done it at that time so that at least the East Coast can come in, as well as Australia, so they can join in as well. And it goes on to 7 p.m. again, CEST time. And again, that's the perfect time that we thought can cover everyone on all time zones.
Yeah, I think my talk, I'm going to be doing a workshop on stakeholder management. So if you've read my book, I've got a chapter in there about that. So it's a lot of just hands-on stuff, like helping you answer questions about that. I think mine's at 7 European Standard Time, 1 p.m. Eastern. I can't remember the exact day, but check out Value UX. What's the website again?
So it's www.valueux.design. So
.design. Yeah. There you go. Value UX design. We'll put all that stuff in the show notes. All right, dude. So like I said, I've got a few silly little questions I like to ask all my guests to help our listeners get to know our guests a little bit better. First thing that comes to your mind, you don't have to think too hard about it. Are you ready?
Go for it. Let's go.
Let's do it. All right. First up, what is your favorite non-design book?
Oh, Surrounded by Idiots by Thomas Erickson. Have you ever heard of it?
No, I haven't.
This book is actually why I went into design up. So what it is, it gives you a color coordination of people that you work with. And why? Well, okay, it's not a design book. It's literally, you can use it with like general people. And it gives you a way to communicate with them based on their color. So for red, he's very aggressive. He's very passionate. He's like an alpha kind of person. You have a certain way to communicate with them. Again, if you're blue, you're analytical, you'll look at data before making decisions. It gave me the advantage, especially with design ops, to know how to work with people. So I use it not only with work, but also with general stuff outside, how to negotiate, how to read language and stuff like that. So it's one of my favorite books.
Right on. I love that. I have to check that out. That sounds like it aligns very well with a lot of the themes in the show as well. So I'm going to check that out. I bet I'll get a nice set of tools. to talk to people. I love that.
Yeah.
All right, next up, what is your favorite non-design podcast?
I don't know, this one's going to be a bit weird. So do you know who Neville Goddard is?
No, I don't.
Do you believe in manifestation?
Is that like if you say it, it'll come
Kind of
true
like,
or something?
kind of like that. But then there's a science behind it. And I love listening to this dude on this podcast. And it's all about, these self-help books and et cetera, et cetera. I get that. It is a bit of a mumbo jumbo kind of thing. But I really started to follow this person's podcast, and he talks a lot about a person called Neville Goddard, who was a teacher back in the 1930s, who spoke about, like, if you think stuff is going to happen to you, it will happen to you. So if you have a negative thought that always something's going to happen to you, or why the world is against me, et cetera, then negativity comes to you. It's about your frequency. It's about you will just attract these things. And so the reason why I say this and why I mentioned it was that podcast that led me to Design Ops Align now, that also led me to Align Consultant right now. And that's actually aligned me to making we're just about to hit our millions in the next couple of weeks. But
oh shit, damn.
I had it. Yeah. So I had the vision about this, and it all came from listening to his podcast. And again, people who might be listening to this might be like, yeah, whatever. I heard it from somebody as well. I was just like, whatever, what are you talking about? What kind of thing is this? And the person said, just give it a go. If you don't believe it, don't have to go to it. And so that's where I gave it a go. And if anyone has doubts about it, I would say look up on YouTube about Neville Goddard and the ladder theory. Try it. If it doesn't work, if it didn't happen to you, then okay, I can't save it, but it happened to me. So look it up on YouTube, Neville Goddard, the ladder theory. Just try it. Just randomly just try it. And if it happens to you, then you know that I was not chatting BS.
Well, maybe that's the secret that I was asking earlier. Like, what's the secret to the successful consulting company? There you go, Neville Goddard. All right, I'll Google it right after this. I'm actually heading to the airport in a little while. I'll download the ebook or something and listen to it. All right, next up, what is your favorite meal? Now, you guys are out in Europe, man. You got so many places you could go eat.
Oh, what, are we talking like different types of cuisine?
You know what? Just favorite meal, favorite thing you've ever put in your mouth that was food. So, could be something you've cooked, something you had at a restaurant, country you visited, something your grandma used to cook. Favorite meal.
That's a hard one. That's a really, I don't know if any of you know about this type of food, but do you know a place called Mauritius?
No.
So Mauritius is an island just off Africa. It was colonized by the French, and the Chinese came there, as well as Chinese, French, and African, as well as the Indians came there. So the food is a mixture of all those cultures. Yeah. So you got African, Indian, French, and Chinese, and that's Mauritius food is. It's amazing. And so I could only say like that their dishes are just absolutely amazing because it's like 4 combinations of the best cuisines in the world. So
oh my God. All right. Yeah, you got me hungry, dude. I just ate lunch a little while ago, but I need to go look this up. All right. Next up, favorite vacation spot. What's your favorite vacation spot?
I like to come to the other side of the pond. I would say Cancun.
Ooh, all right, close to me. There you go. When you go to Cancun, do you like to stay like a local, or do you do one of those like all-inclusive resorts? Just sort of feed you for like weeks straight. So
yeah, Jeremy, I've got 5 kids, so all inclusive is like it's like a blessing to take.
It's funny, dude. My wife and I, we went down to Cancun. This was before we had kids, and we would run into Americans, and they're like, "Yeah, we're here for a few days," But then we would run into people from Europe, and they're like, "Yeah, we're here for 2 weeks." Like we ran into one couple was like, "We're like, yeah, how long are you here for?" They're like, "No, we're not sure yet. We're just taking it day by day." I'm like, "What? Do you guys work? Like, how do you get? I don't understand all these Europeans and their freaking 2-3 week month-long vacations."
It's a law in Switzerland, but in most European countries, they force you to take 2 weeks holiday. So you have to, by health and law reasons. So 1 week is not enough in Switzerland. And so by mandatory law, you have to take a 2-week full holiday. So
see, in America, we're all about freedom. Like, I want to work, you let me work. You let me work. I run my business the way I want. I want my employees to work 80 hours a week. I'm going to do it. That's my American impression, by the way. All right. Next up, what is your favorite design tool that is not Figma?
Ooh, Balsamic. I love Balsamic.
Dude, I was in Balsamic a couple weeks ago for the first time in a decade. Yeah. And I was like, it hasn't changed a bit, man.
Yeah. That's what I love about it. Because again, I am a terrible UI designer and I'm a UX designer. That's one thing I'm definitely great at. So I could easily put together grayscale wireframes and, the designer can translate it into a good UI design. And I believe Balsamic for me was just so perfect. It's just literally drop and drag, done. Give it to the UI designer to then put their touch in it. And then, that was me.
Yeah, I love that, dude. Yeah, it's funny. I was using Balsamic and the whole time I was just like, oh, I can't do a symbol, like, oh, I can't or a component, whatever it's called. But I don't know. Yeah, it was funny, man. I was in it for the first time because I had another designer on my team that had started some stuff and I needed to go and make some edits. And I was like, whoa. I can't, I forgot the last time I was in Balsamic. But yeah, it was fun. It was actually really cool. It was way more components and things and templates and preset. So you just go to drag and drop, like you said, and move stuff around. So it was really cool. All right, Naresh, man. Well, this has been fantastic. I am really excited to chat with you today about story points for designers and how they can start thinking more and speaking the language of the engineering team and having that shared language. I really appreciate you coming on, man. Thank you so much.
Oh, man. It's been a pleasure.
Well, all right, y'all, that's it for Naresh and me for today. I hope we helped to shed a little bit of light on story points, what they are, how they work, and why it might be beneficial for you to try them out. But are you using story points with your team? How's it working out for you? Have you noticed an improvement in how your team plans work? Let me know what you think on LinkedIn or shoot me an email at hello@beyonduxdesign.com. I would love to hear all about it. And if you like what you heard today, don't forget to subscribe wherever you listen to podcasts. And if you feel like you're getting something out of the show, I would love it if you left a 5-star review. That would help me out so much more than you know. And if you know somebody who might find any of this stuff useful, then why don't you tell them about it? That would be fantastic. And if you listened all the way until now, then you've definitely earned a Merit-ish badge. Whether you survive tricky team dynamics, Figma fiascos, or pixel-perfect feedback loops, there's a badge with your name on it. Grab 2 sets for $20 at beyonduxdesign.com/badges. Just promise me one thing. Show me where you stick them. Help keep the show independent and ad-free. Check out beyonduxdesign.com/support to find out how. You can join Chris, Siraquan, Stacy, Radu, Megan, Andrew, John, Mark, Kevin, Jason, Michelle, Marty, Tino, Adina, and Zoe, and many others, and help keep the show independent and ad-free. You'll get exclusive access to the entire video library of episodes, including episodes before they're even released. Get instant access to those videos right now for as little as $5 a month. And if you're tired of staring at a blank Figma canvas, Mobbin gives you access to over 400,000 beautifully designed UI screens and user flows with a library that grows bigger every week. Kickstart your creativity, streamline your workflow, and level up your design process. Visit mobbin.com/beyondux to get 20% off Mobbin Pro and never run out of inspiration again. Remember to sign up for the newsletter and check out all the past episodes along with all the show notes at beyonduxdesign.com. I hope you keep coming back for more great UX tips from Beyond UX Design. And until next time, remember, you're more than a designer because there's more to UX and design. I'll see you around. Take care, y'all. You sound professional. You sound real professional.
I sound professional. You look handsome, sir.
Thank you, sir. Yeah, I trimmed the beard.
Yeah, you're looking sharp.
Stragglers.
You're looking sharp.
Took a shower.